Welcome to What's Now. I'm your host, Christine Napier. Thank you for joining us today. This is a show all about what's trending, and we are going to talk about some excellent things today, from education to your health to true crime. Up first, there is an all-new 5-part documentary series on FX. It's about one of the longest-running crime cases in this country. It's called A Wilderness of Error. Here's more.
Today I had the opportunity to speak with Marc Smerling of A Wilderness of Error. This is an intriguing show that is looking back at an infamous crime. Marc, thanks for joining us here on Park Street Television.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the show, I'd love to hear more about your background, specifically what experiences that you've had that have led you to where you are today.
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, because one of the primary experiences I had was in high school, walking into a movie theater, thinking I was going to go see a horror movie that was sold out, going to the next theater next door in a multiplex and watching The Thin Blue Line, Errol Morris's film about a murder down in Texas. So seeing that, I kind of set the tone for the rest of my career.
I love that. And the show, just tell me more about it.
Well, I was young. I had this idea of being a journalist and being an investigative journalist, and I was already writing on my high school paper, and my friends wanted to go see the movie Halloween, I think it was, or maybe it was Freddy or something like that, and I went, and it was sold out, so I just kind of wandered into the next theater, sat down, and was completely enthralled by this documentary that had recreations about a crime that was a mystery and obviously a wrongful conviction. And I was just like, I want to do that.
And here you are now on A Wilderness of Error, investigating a crime that may be a wrongful conviction that many people are aware of.
I'm sorry, you're a little garbled.
Tell me more about A Wilderness of Error and this crime that you're looking into.
You know what? I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Let me just see if I turn down the volume. You're just a little bit crackly. Go ahead. One more time.
Just tell me more about Wilderness of Error and the crime that you're looking into.
Okay, I can hear you better. Well, this is one of the most popularized crime stories, I think, in American history. I mean, there's been multiple books written about it, TV movies. The book written by Joe McGinnis, Fatal Vision, is one of the best-selling true crime novels in history, true crime nonfiction stories in history. And, Errol's book is sort of the last word on it. So it's about a guy named Jeffrey McDonald and his family. He was a Green Beret doctor down at Fort Bragg. He says that one night, a band of hippies came into his house, drugged out, and attacked him and his family. His family was murdered in a brutal way. He was taken to the hospital with a stab wound to his chest, and he survived. And very quickly, the Army decided, in their investigative service, decided that he was lying about the hippies and that he had murdered his family. But the Army held a hearing, an investigative hearing, and he was let off. 9 years later, he was brought to a court, a civil court, civilian court, federal court in Raleigh, and he was put on trial for the murders, and he was convicted of all three and is now still in prison, saying he's innocent.
And what is it about this particular crime that you wanted to look into more?
Well, there are two levels to the crime. There's two levels to this crime story. One is to try to figure out what really happened back in 1970, and that meant going back and reinvestigating and talking to everybody who's still around who would talk about it, rereading all the court documents and all that. And then the other side of it was to see where reality had sort of been overrun by storytelling. There's just so much popular storytelling around this murder. It seems to me that, and on both sides of it, some of the storytelling is saying he's innocent, some of it's saying he's guilty. And it just seemed like there was some way to kind of analyze that as well and how it affected real life events.
And anything that really surprised you that you can tell us about while you're working on the show?
Oh, wow. Well, there's a lot of surprises for me. I mean, everybody thinks they know this story at some level. It was so written about and so much in the newspaper and has been, I think there's been something like probably 6 or 8 documentaries on television already about this story. So everybody thinks they know it. It's not until you actually start looking at the record that you start seeing things that are in plain sight. And some of the stuff that I think was most surprising was about Helena Stokely, a woman who had serially confessed to being in the house the night of the murders, as sort of the engine that continues to pull Jeffrey's innocence. And there's just so much about her life. I don't think anybody's really looked at her life. And we took a deep dive into her life, talked to her family, talked to people who knew her back when the murders occurred. You know, talked to her roommate who was living with her that night, and really, I think, discovered a lot of fascinating stuff.
I can't wait to watch. Where can we get more information, and when is it on?
Well, there's a website with effects. What is the website's name?
FXNetworks.com.
Yeah, at effectsnetworks.com. There's a website that has a little more information, but it's going to air this Friday night at 8 p.m.
Looking forward to it. Marc, thank you so much for telling us more about A Wilderness of Error right here on Park City Television.
Okay, thank you for having me.